Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be looking at the third video in my Metaphysics series. If you haven't seen the previous ones, I highly recommend you do so, otherwise you may just get confused. Now today we're going to be specifically looking at Causal series and the distinction in between essentially ordered and accidentally ordered causal series. This distinction is one of the most important when talking about arguments for God's existence from scholastics such as Aquinas and his first way. Even so, this distinction is important across metaphysics in general and needs to be talked about. So let's get right into it. When most people think of a causal series, they imagine dominoes falling down and hitting each other. This, of course, is an example of one type of causal series, but there are actually two types. Also, it needs to be noted that a causal series is a series of causes and effects that happen either after each other or simultaneously. This brings us to the two types of series of causes and effects that the scholastics would talk about, namely essentially ordered causal series and accidentally ordered causal series. The Latin for each of these, respectively, is per se and per accidens. In Edward Feser's book, Aquinas, A Beginner's Guide, he explains what an accidentally ordered causal series is when he says, take for example the series consisting of Abraham begetting Isaac, Isaac begetting Jacob, and Jacob begetting Joseph. Once he has himself been begotten by Abraham, and grows to maturity, of course, Isaac is fully capable of begetting Jacob on his own, even if Abraham dies in the meantime. It is true that he would not have existed had Abraham not begotten him, but the point is that once Isaac exists, he has the power to beget a son all by himself, and Abraham's continued existence or non-existence is irrelevant to the exercise of that power. The same is true of Jacob with respect to Abraham and Isaac, and of Joseph with respect to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Given that we are considering them a series of begetters specifically, each member is independent of the others as far as its causal powers are concerned. This entire example demonstrates an accidentally ordered causal series whereby each member in the series does not essentially derive its causal power from the member previous in the series. Edward Feser notes in The Last Superstition that, in Aquinas' view, in theory the series could go back forever into the past. He doesn't think that such a series could go back forever, but he also doesn't think it can be proved through philosophical arguments alone. That is to say, he doesn't think that it can be proved and doesn't try to prove that the universe had a beginning. The reason is that since in an accidentally ordered causal series, the members of the series have their causal power independently of the operation or even existence of earlier members, there is nothing about the activity of the members existing here and now that requires that we trace it back to some first member existing in the past. If we look back at the domino example, we can see that this is an accidentally ordered causal series, and it doesn't matter if the first domino is still there when the 40th domino falls down. When the 100th domino falls down, you could take away the first 50 dominoes, and it would have no effect on the series because each domino in the series does not derive its causal power essentially from the member previous in the series. It only accidentally receives its causal power, therefore you don't have to trace the series back to a first mover. Now, an essentially ordered causal series is very different in that each member in the series does receive its causal power essentially from the member previous in the series. A great example of this is a series of rings that are holding each other up. If you were to take away, say, the top one, they would all fall down in the series because they are essentially deriving their causal power from the member previous in the series. This type of series has to be tracked back to a first cause. Otherwise, none of the members would receive any causal power. Moreover, this happens in one moment of time not stretched back temporally throughout time. And in an accidentally ordered causal series, it does stretch back temporally throughout time and can be seen by the fact that Abraham beget Isaac, say 30 to 40 years before Isaac begets Jacob. This is in stark contrast to essentially ordered causal series, which happens in one moment of time. A great example to demonstrate this is Aquinas, when he says that there is a hand that moves a stick that moves a rock on the ground. In one moment of time, the hand actualizes the potential of the stick to move, which then actualizes the potential of the rock to move. Notice that at any moment in time, if you were to take away the stick, then the rock would cease movement, as it essentially derives its causal power from the stick, and the stick essentially derives its causal power from the hand, and so on and so forth, back to the first cause. Again, this happens in one moment of time. Notice that I use the word moment because it's not like this is happening every second. It's literally happening every single instance of time or moment of time. It's a technical philosophical term. Now, if you haven't seen my video on actin potency, then you're going to want to watch that to understand what I just said here, because it bears enormous ramifications on Aquinas' first way and proving the existence of God. I don't want to get too much into that because I want to make an entire video dedicated to that topic. I don't want to really spoil anything, but that's why I'm making this series, to kind of lay out the foundational things, and then we're going to put them all together in that video. But I bet you guys can start to see how the argument for the unmoved mover is structured. And Mathema, a wonderful YouTuber I mentioned multiple times on this channel, has a video titled Rationality Rules Tries to Debunk the Argument from Motion in the Aristotelian Proof. He points out the absurdity when atheists tend to say, well, the series can just go on forever into the past, and yeah, that's fine, and we'll still have some causal power happening right now. He just really tears up rationality rules. It's a great video. I'm going to roll the clip now.
If there is no first mover, which is to say, if cause and effect is infinite, we have an answer that accurately accounts for our observations, and, most critically, one that doesn't require us to make an unfounded assumption that violates everything we know. Or to put this all another way, given all the evidence we have for movers absolutely requiring a mover, do we have sufficient reason to believe that there's a mover that doesn't require a mover? No. As weird as it might seem, as unintuitive as it might seem, the evidence indicates that everything is contingent on something, and this is further bolstered by the fact that the law of conservation of energy has never been violated, even by quantum mechanics.
No, it's actually an infinite series and a hierarchical series, which is utterly contrary to experience. For in that case, change would be impossible. Imagine this situation. Imagine you try to power your laptop by plugging it into a power strip, and then you try to power the power strip by plugging that into another power strip, and then you plug in the power strip to yet another power strip. Is your laptop going to be powered? Suppose someone suggested, yeah, but how about I do this infinitely many times? I plug in a power strip into another one infinitely many times. Then I can power my laptop. Now, if you think that such a suggestion would be a little bit ridiculous, then think about what you're saying when you propose an infinite regress. For if there is no power, if you will, then there can be no power to actualize. And if nothing can actualize, nothing can be actualized. And if nothing can be actualized, then nothing can change. And that is utterly contrary to experience. Speaking of evidence, there's plenty of evidence that things change.
To clarify and take a slightly different perspective on what I just said, I'm going to quote Edward Fazer here again. He says, essentially ordered causal series paradigmatically trace not backwards in time, but rather downward in the present moment, since they are series in which each member depends simultaneously on other members, which simultaneously depend in turn on yet other members, and so on. In this sort of series, the later members have no independent causal power of their own, being mere instruments of a first member. Hence, if there were no first member, such a series would not exist at all. If the last members of the series does not in fact exist, then the series cannot even in theory go back infinitely. There must be a first member. I know I sound like I'm repeating myself a lot, but notice that an essentially ordered causal series cannot even in principle go back infinitely. You see so many caricatures out there on the internet. Just know that an essentially ordered causal series cannot go back infinitely. Period. End of sentence. And if you don't believe me, if you doubt this, read this paper titled, There Must Be a First, Why Thomas Aquinas Rejects Infinite, Essentially Ordered Causal Series. It's written by Caleb Coho. I've read the entire paper. It's very good. It can be downloaded for free, and I will put a link to it in the description below. Among a multitude of great explanations and examples, as well as technicalities and rebuttals, Coho says, Graven Kerr presents a helpful way of formalizing this difference. Accidentally ordered series can be represented as a series of 1-1 dependence relationships where each member depends directly only on the previous member. In essentially ordered causal series, by contrast, the later members depend directly on and derive their membership from all the earlier members. The on-screen symbols represent each of these, and so why, in a strictly logical formula, the essentially ordered causal series cannot go back forever. Also, in the paper, there's a number of other arguments that are mentioned as well, but I'm not going to go too much into them here, but I just highly recommend you guys read the paper. It's just really stellar and really well written. Finally, let's talk about modern philosophers, and yours truly, David Hume. I mean, this guy seems to always get brought up for denying reality and like common sense stuff. To get around there having to be a first cause in an essentially ordered causal series, he just straight up denies and undermines change. As simple as that. But don't take my word for it. In the Last Superstition, Phaser says, Enlightenment philosophers tend to treat cause and effect as essentially a relationship between temporally ordered events. The standard story goes something like this. Suppose a brick is thrown toward a window. That's one event. Now suppose the window shatters. There's another event. Obviously, the first event came before the second one. We also want to say that the first event caused the second one. But why do we say this? Many events are not caused by the events they follow. So why do we think things are different in this case? After all, even in this case, it is at least conceivable that the first event could occur without the second. The throwing of the brick could, in theory, be followed by the bricks vanishing into thin air, or turning into a rabbit or a Snickers bar. Logically speaking, the events are loose and separate, with no necessary connection between them. So maybe it's just the fact that they're constantly conjoined in our experience that leads us to think there is no connection. Maybe the necessity is in us and not in the objective world. That is to say, maybe there really is no objective connection at all between bricks being thrown and windows shattering, and it's just the way our minds happen to be wired that makes us think that. Maybe cause and effect is just another matter of there being regular or law-like correlations between events, and science must rest content with discovering these correlations. Phaser goes on to say, suppose you asked your uncle what caused the broken window. Unless he's a philosopher, he'd probably say, the brick did it. The brick, not the event of the brick being thrown. In other words, for common sense, it is ultimately things that are causes, not events. Aristotle would agree. He would also say that the immediate efficient cause of an effect and the one most directly responsible for it is simultaneous with the effect, not temporally prior to it. In the case of the broken window, the key in the causal series would be something like the pushing of the brick into the glass and the glass giving way. These events are simultaneous. Indeed, Aristotle would say the brick pushing into the glass and the glass giving away are really just the same event, considered under different descriptions. Or to take an example often used in discussions of Aristotle, we might think of a potter making a pot, where the shaping activity of the potter's hands and the softening clay being shaped are simultaneous, and again one and the same event being described in different ways. But in examples like these, there is no question of the causes and effects being loose and separate, or lacking a necessary connection. To say that a brick pressing through the glass might conceivably not be accompanied by the glass giving way, or the hand shaping the clay might conceivably occur without the clay being shaped, is impossible. Anyway, guys, I hope this cleared up the issue of essentially ordered and accidentally ordered causal series. I trust you guys have a better grasp and understanding of this as we move forward in our Metaphysics series. If you have any questions, definitely leave them down in the comments below, and myself, as well as anybody else who's willing to, can comment and answer back on those issues. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button, as it helps me out a lot and shows me what you guys like. It seems you guys really enjoy the Metaphysics series so far, and I'm going to keep doing that. Also, please consider subscribing, as it helps the channel grow and gets these videos out there. As always, God bless.